I think the Wheel of Time show is growing on me. Not for the reasons that the creators would have hoped, but much in the same way that I look forward to new seasons of the Rings of Power. Driven by a sense of morbid curiosity of what they'll fuck up next, and of course an anticipation of the enjoyment we'll get laughing our way through the show. That really cuts to the essence of hate watching after all. But just because I'm able to extract some modicum of enjoyment out of this debacle of a show doesn't mean it's good. Far from it, in fact. As while I could argue that Season 3 of The Wheel of Time is ever so slightly better than the laughable first two seasons, it still remains a shining example of how not to adapt a beloved source material. And we'll talk about why in this Season 3 review as we go over the good and the bad the season delivered. So here's your spoiler warning. Now let's get into it. We'll start off with the minimal amount of good things this season did. I say things, but it's really more like one thing. When the show finds time to focus on the main story, it can be solid. Now, this should undoubtedly be Rand's show. Season 3 did bring us the Wheel of Time series' best episode with episode 4. Rand's trials at Ruidian, where he stepped back in time through all of his ancestors' lives, was pretty damn cool and captivating. It reminds us that even under all the crap this show has heaped on top of the source material, the Wheel of Time did have a phenomenal story to tell. Even just getting glimpses of it, while bittersweet in a lackluster show, felt good and drew you into the show despite all the crap smothering this main story. And Moraine's journey through the rings in that episode was great as well, as she saw all the possible outcomes of her mission in bringing the Dragon Reborn to bear. I'll complain about all the misguided focus put on subplots and extraneous storylines in a bit, but Moraine's story, being a lot closer and more important to Rand's story than other storylines, still carries a lot of interest and adds a real valuable aspect to the series. As we see her character get more and more fleshed out, her journey takes on a shape of its own, and is directly related to the main story this season should have put more focus on. And that's really about it in the win column for Season 3. I would say the production quality, at least in certain episodes, has improved. But when you stack that up against all the bad we're about to go over, it's peanuts. Now, weaving headfirst into the bad, as I said earlier, this should undoubtedly be Rand's show. Instead, this show is obsessed with Egg, Matt, Perrin, Nynaeve, Elaine, Lanfear, and etc. ad nauseum. These characters all have parts to play in the Wheel of Time story, but they should be treated as second and third tier characters in the early seasons. Sure, I can recognize that the books may have had this problem to a certain extent as well, and other characters become critical to Rand's story further down the line. But without Rand being the focal point, even their stories lose something in translation, as they all ultimately need to come under the umbrella of his story and his journey. Building them up as co-equal characters with co-equal stories this early on just muddies the waters and detracts from what should be this story's main thrust. Not to mention that if you're going to make any change to the source material in adapting the story for television, it should be developing a true main character to keep your story focused. The book series had 14 books, thousands of pages, and millions of words to lay this entire story out and weave it all together. Television doesn't work that way. We don't have 10 years for you to get your shit together. But the show has been an unmitigated disaster in this regard, leaving us with hours of directionless storytelling. They needed to develop Rand as the undisputed focal point of this series from the beginning, or at least once he's revealed to be the Dragon Reborn. But here, in Season 3, I don't even feel like he was a main character. Without that, the Wheel of Time series feels like it has no identity. It just seems like these creators are reaching out in a ton of different directions, grasping at straws. It can feel like Rand's the main character he's supposed to be when the show actually takes the time to make him and his journey the focus. But this is few and far between, and you can tell that the creators have quite a few characters they prioritize over him, leading to this inevitable storyline sprawl away from the Wheel of Time's central story. And that's very much intentional. Whether through what they've done through 3 seasons, or even by what the creators have flat out said, it's clear they simply don't like the books how they were written. And understanding that, it should be no surprise that one of the other fatal flaws with this TV series is its innumerable departures from the books. And believe me, there really are too many departures to list here and keep this video to a reasonable length. There are missing characters, characters that shouldn't be present yet, characters who have died but aren't dead in the books, character stories that are happening out of order, and characters off doing God knows what because they're following some made-up storyline that never appears in the books. It's understandable to cut some things or some characters out to make the show manageable in a TV series format. But what they've done with this series goes far beyond those expected and would-be accepted changes. And maybe all could be forgiven if it was making for a better show, but it's not. It's making the story this is all based on worse. Instead, it's clear that the creator's vision for this show deviates greatly from and often runs counter to the source material and the platform they're abusing to make their crappy show. But to call out a few of the departures, Loyal's premature death may have stung less because it was literally not the first time this show has killed the character. But still, his death in episode 7, assuming it's real this time, means his character will be absent from events later in the story he was very much a part of. And it only seems to have been done to simply manufacture some emotion this season, perhaps limit a minuscule amount of the sprawl problem the show has created for itself, and maybe even save some money on prosthetics moving forward. Matt was supposed to be heading to the White Tower to be healed, and eventually meeting the Aelfin and Eelfin, but he only did one of those things, on accident, and he spent the rest of his time just tagging along with Min and Nynaeve, doing nothing of interest or import. Lanfear is shown to fear Moghedien, someone that really shouldn't be a problem for her based on their relative strengths in the books. And representing the biggest change from the books, Rand headed to the Aiel Waste before going to the Stone of Tyr and claiming the prophesized Kalendor, and it looks like his rematch with Ishamael is out the window. So this show is deep, out in uncharted waters in a lot of ways, with no real hope of finding their way back. Now, because of the character sprawl we talked about before, this show this season also struggled to put forth a big bad villain. Call it old-fashioned or cliche, but without having an overarching villain to act as a true north and unify all of the sprawling character storylines and have the characters themselves rally against, you lose something. A lot of something. Lanfear's just as likely to fuck our heroes as she is to kill them. The spider chick Moghedien was pretty creepy and flat out gross at times, but she never posed much of a threat to anyone of import in the show. Ishamael seems to be gone forever, which is probably no big loss, given how his adaptation in the show left a lot to be desired. Padon Fane took his beating and scarpered. And as much as I like making fun of Chipmunk Supreme, her arc this season didn't have too much serious effect on anyone important outside of the beginning of episode 1. I mean, just taking a step back, if you're someone like me, initiated into the world of the Wheel of Time by this show and not intimately familiar with the books, could you honestly watch this show and tell me who or what all of the characters are actually fighting against? I know, because I've done my research, but left with just this show to answer the question, you'd have a very vague idea of what they're even trying to accomplish. The Dark One, who's imprisoned and bent on bringing about the breaking of the world, barely even gets mentions in this show, while his Forsaken and other various lieutenants try and carry out his will. But 3 seasons into this show, he remains a vague, ethereal presence in this series, whose name rarely even reaches our hero's lips, and who never feels like an overbearing force of darkness everyone is in mortal danger from. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but we've never even seen a portrayal of the Dark One in this outside of some fleeting visions, have we? This season was really just about following yet another leg of the journey for these characters, without ever feeling a real, overarching, threatening presence that's determined to stop them. So, to come back to an old refrain of mine, this season just felt like it was spinning its wheels toward nothing in particular. On another front, this show's problem of presenting us with entirely contrived lesbian relationships reared its head once again. Moraine's relationship with Suan goes back to the first season, so it's no real surprise that resurfaced this season. But Elaine's sudden romantic relations with the Acolyte were, at best, a gross misrepresentation of their relationship in the books, and it reeked of shitty fanfiction shipping. Especially when viewed from the end of the season and you see it was done for literally one hookup scene. And it's all just more data points evidencing this show's creators' misguided approach to adapting this book series. And as a result, while that kind of fanfiction and lesser character storylines worked their way to prominence this season, a likable character like Lan is forced to take much more of a backseat this season. Which is a shame, because I know that a lot of Wheel of Time fans would have loved to see more of his training with Rand. Of all the other characters' arcs this season, Perrin's is the only one that I can say wasn't an absolute drag on this show. As much as the creators want me to, I don't care about Egg having bad dreams. I don't care about Min's bad visions. I don't care about bad drama at the White Tower. This show's never made me care about those things, yet they almost always get more time and weight than everything that I could care about. I could probably go longer in this section, but you get the point. Viewing this series as a whole, The Wheel of Time Season 3's fan ratings on Rotten Tomatoes has significantly increased from its first season, coming in at 83%, up from the 61% Season 1 got. Now, as I often point out with these floundering shows in their second and third seasons, I'm convinced that a substantial reason for this comes from addition through subtraction. With far less people sticking with a subpar show 2 seasons later, you're just left with people who mostly enjoy the show to rate it. But as I said near the start, Season 3 may represent a slight improvement for the show overall, so some improvement on those ratings is to be expected. The number is still insanely overinflated though, as this show belongs in the 30 to 40% range at best for people unfamiliar with the books, and probably even lower for those familiar with them. Now, information on viewership for this third season is sparse. When I tried searching for it throughout the season, in fact, almost all of the top results were puff pieces lauding the show as record-breaking for being in the mid-80s on Rotten Tomatoes, which is a laugh riot in its own regard. But yeah, outside of isolated Nielsen charts, there's very little discourse about this season's viewership and how it compares to previous seasons. Which probably means it's not too good. It came in at 7th place in the latest Nielsen Originals chart, but it doesn't make the overall charts. And last week's charts showed it barely getting half of what Kraven the Hunter was getting. But as best I can tell, Season 3 is clocking in at about 40% the viewership Season 1 got. So, as can be surmised from the relative lengths of the good and the bad sections of this video, Season 3 of The Wheel of Time earns a hate watch label from me. Meaning it's good for nothing more than our mockery. But at least we've gotten some enjoyment from pointing and laughing at it. As of now, a renewal for a 4th season of The Wheel of Time is still noticeably absent, so we're just left to discuss whether it should continue. Based solely on its quality, the story it's given us, the unforgivable departures from the story fans were looking for, the question is academic. But will it continue? Who knows? Probably. It's defied logic for 3 seasons, so what's one more? If it does come back for a 4th season, you can bet that HateWatchers will be back to call on our one power and weave some fart jokes into the next debacle The Wheel of Time delivers. What did you think about Season 3? Do you hope for another season just to have something to laugh at? Are there any particular scenes from the books you're hoping to see before the show kicks the bucket? Let us know in the comments below. As always, like the video if you liked it, and subscribe to HateWatchers for reviews of other current shows and movies. Thank you for aimlessly meandering our way through this directionless season with us today, and we'll catch you on the next one.